Many thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video.
Good morning. So I am headed to this, my favorite tree, my favorite local tree. Interesting thing about this tree is that it's the very first tree I ever photographed when I got into landscape photography. And unfortunately, its days are numbered. Every time I travel to this location, which isn't too far from my home, I notice that it's developed a little bit more and a little bit more, both commercially and residentially. And I know one day I'm going to travel to this location and this tree is just not going to be there anymore, which is a shame because it does hold a special place in my heart. It's where I first got into this genre of photography. So it's a super cool tree. And as I kind of make this hike to its location, I think it's still going to be there. But every year the development gets a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And one day she won't be there. There she is. She still lives, thankfully so. So I wanted to mention this really fast. I had mentioned in my video last week about setting a timer because I wanted I wanted to ensure the video didn't drag on forever. And I got so much positive feedback about that. And it really got my wheels spinning as to what you think is a good duration for a video. Is it between 5 and 10 minutes? Is it 10 and 15 minutes? Or does it even matter as long as the content is valuable? If you could just leave me a comment in the comment section below as to what you think is a good duration of a video, I would really appreciate it. So in this week's video, I'm not going to have any kind of B-roll, no shots of me pulling out my camera or setting up my tripod or anything like that. Just kind of rapid fire, on location landscape photography hacks. These are things that I always mention in some capacity on workshops, and they always get such great feedback. So I wanted to kind of put them all together in one quick video, and hopefully you'll be able to find some hopefully you'll be able to find some helpful information that you can apply to your photography moving forward. Every year starts to get a little bit more overgrown, but this tree looks really fantastic in the fall. This time I'm going to try and get a little bit kind of closer and under the kind of the canopy of the tree, just kind of looking up. Whenever you use a wide angle lens, I like the kind of natural distortion that creates, and it just makes the tree look even more grandiose with like the branches kind of hanging out, and almost looks like it's kind of hugging the photograph a little bit. But I'm using my 23mm prime, so it's on a medium format camera, so it's pretty wide, and I'm really close to it and it's kind of angled up just to try and get a little bit of a different view. I'm not expecting anything fantastic out of this shot, as these are not the best conditions, but I'm hoping that in the fall, so we got a few more weeks till these leaves start to change a little bit and get a nice misty or foggy morning, and this tree really pops. But yeah, it's always great to come back to this location though. So this is one of the coolest little hacks or tricks that I know about. So I'm not going to try and save the best for last, but this is one of the coolest things. And it's basically this right here. This little tiny, I think this is maybe a $2 little bungee cord with clips on each end. And what's so cool about this is you hang this from your camera or from your tripod. So most tripods do have this little kind of a hook right here at the bottom. And I see a lot of people hang the loop of their camera bag right on here. And what happens is the bag is actually suspended in the air. And they do that, to kind of support your tripod, and that makes sense. But when the bag is suspended in the air, and if it's a little bit windy, which is the reason why you'd want to support your tripod even more than normal, that bag starts to shift a little bit, and that actually makes your situation worse. But this right here, in my opinion, is the trick to all this. I'll show you what I mean. So if you take this little bungee cord and run it through the top loop of your bag, let me show you, like that, and then run it through that little loop at the top, or I should say the little hook on the bottom of your tripod, and then let your bag rest on the ground. And the actual bungee cord is a little bit tight now. And what's so cool about that is, or what makes it different than just hanging your bag on that hook, is the bag is actually sitting on the ground itself. So the bag can't move at all, but the bungee cord has got a lot of pressure pulling down, and it really anchors the tripod down. So that's something that I have found really locks your tripod down in windier situations. So that's something that I find absolutely invaluable. And the best part is this little bungee cord costs like, I think $1 or $2, depending on which one you get. So well worth the money. Man, it is humid out here. Starting to get some nice light on the top of the tree right there. Now, this next hack is doesn't pertain to this location at all. But whenever you're shooting around moving water, especially the ocean or waterfalls or streams or any situation where you have to put a portion of your tripod in the water itself, you know, how many times do you end up with stuck tripod legs in the joints of your tripod? It just gets kind of real gritty. But something that'll really help with that is if you're aware of which portion of your tripod you actually put in the water. So instead of extending, you know, this portion of your tripod and then putting all of these joints underneath the water, underneath the surface, try unscrewing the bottom section of your tripod. Let me lock all this down. So just this portion, and then only putting this in the actual water itself, because there's no joints. So ultimately, the more often you can keep these joints or these locking areas above the water, the better you're going to be. So I always try and extend out the bottom portion of my tripod and put this portion in the actual water itself. And when you do that, you're going to have those stuck joints or gritty joints much less often. Something that I have gotten into the habit of doing pretty much all the time is always testing out a circular polarizer just to see exactly what it does, does for a given scene. Because, you know, I used to only apply a polarizer. I think a lot of people do this whenever you're shooting around moving water, trying to remove those reflections. It's one of the biggest or top use cases of using a polarizer. But there's so many situations where a polarizer can benefit your scene. And I've gotten into the habit now, I try a polarizer out on every single scene just to see if it's doing anything. And you'd be surprised how many reflections are on dry leaves just from the sun or just from the light that's coming from the sky. And a polarizer can cut through that, and it really simplifies the scene and makes those kind of colors pop a little bit more. So just because there's not moving water around, still try and use a polarizer, just kind of rotate it around, see if it creates an effect that you like. And if you don't, then just take it off. But always just testing it out just to see if it's improving a given scene at all. Now for this one right here, let's see. Let me brighten it up just a touch. Yeah, see, I wouldn't have expected it, but yeah, it's removing a little bit of the reflection off of the tops of these leaves and just kind of making those greens just kind of stand out just a little bit more. Let's see. I'm using f8, ISO 500. Shutter speed of 1/4 of a second. It's pretty still out here, so I don't have to worry about any kind of leaves moving or anything like that. But yeah, looks good. Not too bad. I love the canopy of trees, or canopy of branches and leaves on this one. I'm not sure if you can hear that in the background, but there's been a woodpecker just pecking the entire time that I've been filming this video. Although I can't see where he is, but he's definitely up there. Now, I would be remiss if I don't mention this next one. I did mention it in last week's video, but every time I bring this up, it is always a very talked about item. And it's, in my opinion, probably the best rain solution for your camera. And it's just this basic little shower cap right here. And I'll show you what I mean. And what's so cool about this solution, one, it takes up literally no room in your bag at all. It's tiny. You can buy tons of these things for just a couple of dollars. And it's the ease of use and how quickly you can remove it from your camera. Cover it up and take it off. Oh, I had to crouch down for a minute. Photographing this tree at such a low angle is really wreaking havoc on my knees. But something else that's really cool to try out is vertical telephoto panoramas. I know it's a real mouthful, but I personally love the compressing effect that a long lens creates for a composition. I think that putting on a long lens can really add a very unique flavor to any shot. But one of the drawbacks is that, and I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword, but whenever you're zoomed in with a longer lens, your field of view is shrunk. It's much less wide than, of course, a wide-angle lens. But like for this particular scene right here, I love the way that it's kind of compressing the scene. It's kind of pulling the background trees together with the main tree, but I can't capture the whole tree anymore. But if I put my camera in a vertical orientation and make a sweeping panorama, then it basically alleviates the issue of having that very small field of view. But at the same time, I'm still able to, I guess, enjoy the effect that that long lens provides. I'll show you what I mean right now. The lighting is really starting to get nice right now. Just little puddles, little pockets of light kind of dancing all over the leaves and the branches and then kind of the tree trunk. Just creates a little bit more interest, a little bit more of a high dynamic lighting situation. Just kind of pulls the image together a little bit more. Gives it just that one more quality that this image is kind of lacking, honestly. But as far as vertical telephoto panoramas are concerned, it's real simple to do. Just put your camera in a vertical orientation. I always point the camera right at my main subject, which is the tree, of course. And then I'll shift my orientation to the left to where the main subject is just out of frame. Focus it, go ahead and take my exposure. 2-second timer just to let everything settle a little bit, and then move it over to the right. I'm gonna line up the tree perfectly, focus, take my exposure, and so on and so forth. But I think vertical telephoto panoramas is absolutely something a little bit more unique to do. And it's just a great way to kind of solve that problem of a narrow field of view that is pretty common whenever you're using a longer focal length. But I think it's something that is always worth trying out, especially once you capture your wide angle shot. Throw in that long lens, do a telephoto panorama just to try and get a little bit more variety to better tell a story of that particular location that you happen to be photographing. I'm not 100% certain that this next one really constitutes being a hack. I guess it kind of is, because it's a way to get around using filters, maybe if you don't have filters with you. But I often get a question on a lot of the photos that I capture, especially when there's moving water. People are always asking, what kind of a filter do you use? How long was your exposure? Was it a 3-stop, 6-stop, or 10-stop ND filter? And the answer is almost always, I didn't use any filter. And there's a technique that's called, I think it's called dragging the shutter. I mean, depending on who you ask, you'll probably hear a little bit different naming convention for it. But there's a lot of ways to really slow down, I guess artificially slow down your shutter speed just by the settings that you're able to use or that you apply to a given scene. So whenever I'm photographing moving water, if you just need to slow that shutter down maybe 1/4 of a second or 1/2 a second or maybe 1 full second, you can easily just stop down your aperture and maybe instead of using f8, maybe use f11. That'll enable you to slow that shutter speed down a little bit. Dropping your ISO will also help you to do that. But there's a lot of ways to kind of drag the shutter out without actually having to use ND filters. So if you encounter a scenario where you want to kind of blur some kind of movement in water or maybe the sky or the clouds, moving clouds above, and you don't want to, or maybe you don't have your ND filters with you, or maybe you don't have time to put them on, maybe stop down your aperture a little bit, drop that ISO some, and that'll just give you this situation, or enable you to just drag that shutter speed out a little bit just to kind of show that movement. So that's something that you can do to get around having to actually use a filter in a specific scenario. So this is a pretty common question as to how to create a Sunstar, and it could not be easier. So I'm at f32 right now, and you can see that the Sunstar is very, very evident. But if I change this to wide open at f5.6, let's bring my shutter speed down so you can actually see what we're doing, you'll notice that the Sunstar is gone. But if I take this back up to f32, and let's kind of change the shutter speed, now you can see that Sunstar start to appear. So basically all you do is just stop down your aperture until you see the Sunstar appear. And some lenses are better at it than others, but it's definitely something that's worth trying to do, or just testing out to see if it kind of works for your particular scene. I lied, there's one more, and I meant to mention this when I was talking about vertical panoramas, but it's the hand trick, and this works for panoramas, it works for focus stacking, and it's just a great way to stay organized when you start to post-process your photographs. But whenever I start a panorama, I will go ahead and just take a photo of my hand, and then whenever I'm done moving my panorama for the final image, after I capture that image, take a photo of my hand. That way when you import everything in Lightroom or Capture One or whatever photo editing software you're using, you can see where your panorama begins and see where your panorama ends. And the same thing with focus stacking. If you've ever had to try and figure out which images belong in a certain focus stack series. You can spend a ton of time zooming in to see exactly which image goes with which set. But using that hand trick, just take a photo of your hand at the beginning of your focus stack series, take a photo of your hand at the end of your focus stack series. You can easily see where that series begins and where that series ends. And like I said, you can do that with Panorama series. You can also do that with focus stack series as well. But that will save you a ton of time in the proverbial I guess Lightroom or the post-processing room or whatever your photo editing workflow is. So I do hope those on-location hacks are something that you can apply to your photography moving forward. I know a lot of those things definitely save me a lot of time, save me a lot of money, and just kind of help me perform better while I'm in the field as well. And I hope the same for you. Now, before I do wrap up this week's video, I do want to say just a big thanks to the sponsor of this week's video, which is Squarespace, who I use for all of my website and e-commerce needs.
Squarespace provides a dynamic and attractive online platform to create your website. You can display your photography using Squarespace's professional portfolio designs and customize the layout and look and feel of your gallery just so you can make it your own. With Squarespace's traffic overview feature, you can track trends in page visits and views to better optimize your content, and you can even grow and engage with your customers with Squarespace's email campaign tools, which will enable you to create engaging emails that match your website with your products or blog post and logo, just so your messaging remains consistent.
So if you're looking to start a new website or possibly upgrade your current website, check out squarespace.com/Mark Denney for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. So I do hope you enjoyed this week's video. As always, I really do appreciate you taking the time to watch it. I have no idea how long this will actually be, but hopefully it won't be too long of a video. But I really do appreciate it. If you did enjoy it, if you could give it that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And like I mentioned a moment ago, as always, I really do appreciate you watching this week's video, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.